The snow had fallen quietly over Winterfell that morning, soft and heavy, just the way Sansa liked it. The courtyard was cloaked in silence, but inside her chambers, her heart pounded like a war drum. She stood in front of the tall mirror, brushing. Her auburn hair, her face calm, almost serene. Her eyes, though icy blue and far too still, revealed the storm swirling beneath. Tonight, a king would die, and not just any king, Bran Stark, her own brother. They called him Bran the Broken, the boy who became king without lifting a sword, the cripple who saw through ravens and dreams and death. But Sansa knew better. He hadn't just taken the throne, he'd stolen it. When the war was done and the ashes settled, Westeros had needed peace, order, someone wise and detached. Bran had fit the role too well. No emotion, no ambition, no mercy. And that's exactly what made him dangerous. Sansa had watched, quietly from the north, crowned queen in her own right. But she had also watched as ravens carried news from King's Landing. How the realm bent further into silence. Lords who disagreed with Bran mysteriously vanished. Houses that once stood tall were suddenly declared extinct, all under the banner of balance. Bran didn't rule like a Stark. He ruled like a god. The final push came when he stripped the North of its independence. "He is your brother," they told her. "He sees what we cannot," whispered his small council. But Sansa had seen enough. Tonight, she would do what no one else dared, stop the rot at the root. Down in the cellars, the poison waited clear, tasteless, almost myth. Only Walgrave of Oldtown knew how to distill it. And he was already dead, drowned in his own ink weeks ago. Sansa slipped the vial into her sleeve. The banquet hall glittered with candlelight and false laughter. The southern lords had come to Winterfell to honor the king's first royal visit to the north. Bran sat at the long table, stiff as ever in a high-backed wooden chair, expression unreadable. Arya wasn't here. Jon was lost to the snow beyond the wall, and Tyrion, well, Tyrion was always drunk these days, shamed and silent. Sansa poured his wine herself. "My queen," Bran said without turning his head. She paused. "My king, you were troubled." Of course, he knew. He always knew too much. "I'm thinking about the north," she lied with a smile. "And what of it?" he asked, eyes still far away. "That it deserves better." Their eyes met finally and, for the first time in years, Bran blinked. "I see now," he said, softly. "Too late," Sansa whispered. She touched the goblet to her lips, pretending to sip, then handed it to him. 100 eyes in the hall, none suspicious. After all, she was just being a gracious sister, a good hostess. Bran drank. It didn't take long. The hall fell quiet as his cup slipped from his fingers. He twitched once, sharply, then again violently this time, then nothing. Gasps echoed. Chairs scraped back. The king's head lolled to the side. A trickle of crimson ran from his nose, and Sansa screamed. She played it perfectly. The shock, the panic, the demand for the maester. The blame placed on the wine barrels delivered from King's Landing. She ordered the guards to seal the gates, no one in or out. Within hours, ravens flew to every corner of the realm. The king was dead, and Sansa Stark was next in line. But behind her grief-stricken expression, behind the tears she shed in public, was something darker, something colder. She had been a pawn long enough. Now she was queen, and no one, not even family, would stand in her way again. The Raven arrived in King's Landing by dawn, cutting through the morning haze like a whisper of death. Lord Gendry Baratheon read the scroll first, his hands trembling slightly as he scanned the words. King Bran the Broken Dead. Natural causes suspected. Queen Sansa Stark presiding over investigation. Natural causes. Gendry wasn't stupid. Bran didn't eat, didn't drink not, unless it was necessary. He was cautious, calculating, and above all else, too smart to die by accident. The words smelled of something foul, but he said nothing, not yet. By the time the council met, that afternoon, the small council table was thick with tension. Sir Davos leaned forward. We all knew Bran's health wasn't strong, but the timing feels too convenient, doesn't it? Tyrion Lannister hadn't spoken a word. His eyes were rimmed red, a flask hidden beneath the folds of his robe. When he finally looked up, his voice was hoarse. Convenient for whom, Davos? No one answered. Because they all knew. Back in Winterfell, Sansa walked the halls with calm precision. Her mourning cloak was midnight black, lined with direwolf fur. Her face, pale and composed, barely betrayed the whirlwind raging beneath. Arya's raven hadn't come, nor had Jon's. Maybe they didn't care. Maybe they knew already. She wondered sometimes if Bran had whispered the truth to them in one of his strange dream walks, shown them what was coming. But if he had, they hadn't stopped her. They hadn't tried. That made them complicit. She stepped into the crypts. That night, her footsteps echoing over ancient stone. The air was thick with the scent of old dust and frost. She stood before her father's statue, Ned Stark, the only man who had ever truly loved her without condition. She imagined him frowning now, quiet disappointment in his ghostly eyes. You raised a Stark, she whispered, and the world buried them all. Footsteps behind her. She didn't turn. Are you praying or confessing? Tyrion's voice. Drunk, as usual. Sansa turned slowly, her expression unreadable. What are you doing here? I came to pay my respects. And to ask a question. She crossed her arms. Ask it. Did you kill him? Silence stretched. Somewhere above them, a winter wind howled like a dying animal. You always were clever, she said. Not clever enough, it seems. They stared at each other, to survivors of the great game. To people molded by cruelty, betrayal, and the machinery of power. I had to, Sansa said finally. Her voice didn't waver. He stopped being Bran a long time ago. Tyrion shook his head. You poisoned the king of the Six Kingdoms. I protected the North. You murdered your own brother. She stepped forward, voice sharpening. He sat there and watched the world burn. He did nothing for Daenerys, nothing for Jon, nothing for the children buried beneath the rubble. Of King's Landing, he watched because he could. Because he was no longer human. Tyrion took another drink, then looked at her, bitter smile curling. And now you're what? Queen of the Ashes? No, she said. Now I am Queen of the North. And soon of the realm. He raised an eyebrow. And what makes you think the other kingdoms will accept you? They'll accept peace, she replied. Or they'll face what comes when they don't. She didn't need dragons. She didn't need wildfire. She had something more dangerous, truth, twisted into righteousness, and a realm desperate for stability. Tyrion chuckled bitterly. I should have let that crossbow fly when you were still. A girl. Perhaps, she replied, stepping past him. But now, you'll either serve me or I'll write your eulogy myself. The funeral for Bran Stark lasted 3 days. The banners of all the great houses lined the courtyard. The people of Winterfell stood in quiet reverence as his body was lowered into the crypts. No one spoke of poison, no one dared, because the queen wept, and when a queen cries, the realm listens. But when she plots, the realm bleeds. As the ceremony ended, Sansa looked up at the grey sky, her crown catching the pale sunlight. A raven landed near her boot. She took the note from its leg. A single sentence, in a familiar hand. "I'm coming home." Arya, the corners of Sansa's lips curved something between a smile and a warning. Let her come. Let them all come. The ship cut through the freezing waters like a blade, its black sails bearing no sigil, no house colours. Arya Stark stood at its bow, wind whipping her hair as the northern shores grew larger on the horizon. Her face was blank, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the railing. She had received the raven 3 days ago. Bran, dead Sansa in command. Natural causes. She didn't believe a word of it. Arya had walked among liars, killers, and kings. She had worn the faces of the dead. She had watched truth bend until it snapped. And now she was sailing back home. Not as a little sister, but as someone who knew how to kill queens. Winterfell stood tall in the distance, untouched by war, proud and grey against the snow-covered hills. But something about it felt colder, no more silent than before. The ravens circling overhead seemed slower, darker, like they carried secrets in their wings. By the time Arya crossed the gates, the castle was already buzzing with whispers. Lords from the Vale, the Reach, and even the Stormlands had begun to arrive under the banner of mourning. Yet beneath the surface of grief was something sharper fear. It hung in the halls like smoke. Servants bowed as Arya passed, their eyes darting. The guards stiffened. No one met her gaze directly. She saw the cracks in the stone, the tension in the walls. Sansa met her in the great hall. They stared at each other across the long stone table, snow still clinging to Arya's boots. "You came fast," Sansa said, her voice measured. "I came because you didn't send the truth," Arya replied flatly. Sansa didn't flinch. "The truth is in the crypt." "You're welcome to look." "I already did," Arya said. His body was too clean. No signs of illness, no rot. His eyes were shut, Sansa, you shut them. There was a pause, a long one. Sansa moved toward the hearth, her fingers brushing the carved edge of the mantle. "I suppose you've already made up your mind." "I haven't," Arya said, "but I will." The silence between them now was not sisterly, it was deadly. "You used to say I was the dangerous one," Arya said softly. "But you've learned how to kill without a blade." Sansa turned back, the firelight dancing in her eyes. "And you've learned to kill with one, without ever asking what comes after." "I don't need to ask," Arya snapped. "I don't want a throne. I want the truth." Sansa's voice turned cold. "The truth is this. Bran was no longer fit to rule. He saw everything but felt nothing. He would have sacrificed the realm for his visions. I did what was necessary. You decided that." Arya stepped forward. "You alone." Sansa didn't answer. She didn't need to. Outside the hall, the banners of Winterfell fluttered in the wind. Inside, the air had grown thick with old wounds, old ghosts, and something else, a new war beginning in silence. That night, Arya slipped through the castle like a shadow. Old habits returned easily. She watched who came and went. She studied the wine stores, the maester's logs, the castle kitchens. The puzzle was there. She could feel it. Someone had helped. Someone had delivered the poison. Sansa hadn't done it alone. In the rookery, she cornered Mester Hallen. "You were the one who pronounced Bran dead." He shifted nervously, candlelight flickering against his wrinkled face. "Speak," Arya said, stepping closer, "or I'll make you beg to confess." He swallowed. "There was something strange. The wine cup was missing when I arrived. Guards said it had been cleared." "Who cleared it?" He hesitated. "She did." Arya closed her eyes. Of course she did. The next morning, the realm's nobles gathered in the great hall. Sansa stood at the head of the table, draped in black and silver. She spoke of grief, of duty, of keeping the North strong. Arya stood near the back, silent, watching, waiting, plotting. Because now, it wasn't just about Bran. Now, she needed to know how far her sister would go, and whether blood still meant anything when power tasted better than honor. The sun barely pierced through Winterfell's overcast sky, casting long, uneasy shadows across the snow-covered courtyard. The castle had never felt so full. Lords from across the realm had arrived to mourn a king. But they lingered for reasons unspoken. Some claimed it was loyalty. Others whispered of power shifts, alliances, and a new monarch on the rise. Sansa stood at the center of it all, poised like a queen carved from ice. Every move she made was deliberate, every word measured. Her crown, simple and elegant, gleamed above her red hair, a reminder of who she was and what she had become. But deep inside, the walls were beginning to crack. Arya had become a shadow again. In the past 2 nights, 3 servants had vanished, 2 of them quietly relocated to chambers far from the main hall. One, a boy named Timriquis, found gagged and terrified behind the grain cellar, babbling about someone watching the wine barrels the night Bran died. Sansa heard this from Seer Roderick, her captain of the guard, who reported it with a nervous glance. "He won't stop shaking," he said. "He says someone in noble colors came through the kitchen entrance carrying a vial." Sansa's blood chilled. That wasn't part of the plan. "There was no vial," she lied smoothly. "The boy's confused. Find a place for him far from the rest, somewhere quiet. And if he talks," Sansa paused, "then make sure he never does." Arya, meanwhile, had been listening, always listening. Timric hadn't talked to anyone else. She made sure of that. She'd gotten to him first, crouched in the shadows of the stables while he sobbed into his knees. She learned about the vial, about the handmaid who had rushed him out of the kitchen that night, about the figure in a grey cloak slipping out through the side corridor, heading toward the east wing, Sansa's wing. That night, Arya followed the trail again. This time, she didn't hide. She walked the halls with purpose, staring the guards in the eye. She was a Stark, after all. No one stopped her. No one dared. At the end of the eastern corridor, behind a locked door, she found something that made her stomach twist. A small box, hidden beneath the floorboards behind a loose stone. Inside, an empty vial. She held it to the candlelight. It smelled faintly of crushed mint and iron. Not wine, not medicine. Something else, something ancient. She tucked it into her cloak just as the door behind her creaked. Sansa. The sisters stood there in silence. "What are you looking for, Arya?" Sansa asked calmly, her voice low. Arya held up the vial. "Truth." Sansa didn't blink. "And what will you do with it?" "I don't know yet," Arya replied. "I want to believe you. I want to think you had no choice." Sansa stepped inside the room, closing the door behind her. "You always wanted simple answers. Kill or spare. Right or wrong. That's not how the world works." Arya's jaw clenched. "You sound like Littlefinger." That made Sansa flinch just barely. Littlefinger played with lies. "I used truth as a blade." "So you admit it." I admit, Sansa said, taking another step, that I stopped a mad king before he could destroy everything. I admit that the North comes first. I admit that if you try to stop me, I will end you too. Arya reached for her dagger. Sansa didn't flinch. Do it, she whispered. Kill your last sister. Burn down the Stark name. Let them see the wolf children devour each other. That's what they want, isn't it? Arya froze. Her hand trembled. Then she lowered the blade. This isn't over, she muttered. No, Sansa said quietly. It's only beginning. 2 days later, a new raven flew to King's Landing. The Queen of the North proposes unification under her reign. A peaceful alliance with one crown. Back in the shadows, Arya watched the raven disappear into the sky. She had to choose soon. Expose her sister's crime and bring down a queen, or let the lie live and save the realm from another war. But she wasn't the only one watching. In the kitchens, a low-born girl who once polished silverware now held a different kind of secret name. A vial, a face she couldn't forget, and she had already started writing her own letter to someone who hated both Stark girls more than anyone else in West. Cersei Lannister's loyalists were still alive, and they were listening. The raven flew fast, slicing through the chill northern winds like a ghost. It carried a message written in clumsy but urgent script, sealed not with wax but with fear. In the corner of the parchment, smeared with soot and wine, was a single word written in shaking hands: poison, and beneath it, Sansa Stark, witnessed, evidence hidden in Winterfell. The girl who sent it, Elsbeth No, older than 14, had waited 3 days before writing, long enough to know what she'd seen that night wasn't some dream. She remembered the polished vial, the flushed face of the handmaid delivering it, and the Queen's pale fingers brushing it into her sleeve. But Elsbeth had no power, no house, no voice. So she wrote to someone who still had power in secret, someone who hated Starks enough to act. The raven flew south. Inside Winterfell, preparations for coronation began. Sansa walked through the great hall as servants rearranged the banners. The northern direwolf still hung above the throne, but beside it, new banners were being stitched, a new crest forged from snow and steel, to symbolize a united realm under the North's command. She was calling herself Queen of the Broken Realm, a name meant to honor Bran, while quietly burying him. Arya stood by the window, watching it all unfold. "You're planning to take all 7 kingdoms," she said. Sansa didn't look at her, only the ones worth saving. "You're not our father." "No," Sansa said softly. "He died with honor. I want to live with power." There was no point in pretending anymore. Arya had stopped asking questions. Now she was listening, tracking, studying. She had already mapped out the network of servants inside Winterfell. 3 knew the truth. 1 had vanished. 1 was dead. The last Elsbeth was missing. Arya went to her quarters. Nothing. Her cot untouched. Her cloak gone. She was too late. Far to the south, in the smoky ruins of Harrenhal, a hooded figure held the raven's message. In gloved hands, Lady Amara Lannister, daughter of a cousin once exiled by Cersei, read the words twice before smiling. "I told them," she muttered to the shadows. "A Stark always kills the ones they love." Her followers, Sking's Guard, exiled merchants, and bitter bannermen with no banners left stood behind her. Dozens of them, waiting for a cause, waiting for revenge. Amara turned to her second-in-command. "Send word to Riverrun and to Dawn. Tell them the North murdered a king and their queen is preparing to take everything. She lit the scroll aflame. Let's give them a reason to march. Back in Winterfell, Sansa stood in front of the weirwood tree, snow falling around her like ashes. Her face was blank, but inside she felt the walls closing in. Arya was growing, quieter, more distant. Her silence meant she was planning something. And then came the news from the rookery. A raven intercepted on the road, south partially burned, sealed with no sigil, but written in a northern tongue. Maester Holland handed it to Sansa, without a word. She read it. Her hands didn't tremble. She sent word, Sansa said. Someone saw Roderick, the captain of her guard, stepped forward. Do you want the girl found? No, Sansa replied coldly. I want her replaced. That night, Arya slipped into the rookery. She wasn't expecting to find the Maester awake. You're too late, he said without looking at her. It's already gone. Who sent it? He glanced at her. A girl, Elsbeth. She's gone, vanished like the wind. Arya's throat tightened. Where? No one knows. But she knew what she saw. And now others will too. Arya turned to leave, but Harlan called out. She'll kill again, he said. Your sister, if she feels threatened. Arya stopped in the doorway. She's not a murderer, she muttered. The Maester gave a bitter laugh. She wasn't. Neither were you. Morning broke with fire on the horizon. A raven arrived from Riverrun. Lord Edmure had withdrawn his banners. He would no longer support Queen Sansa. One from Dawn. The Martells declared neutrality until further investigation. One from the Vale. Silence. The realm was splintering again, and Sansa felt it in her bones. In her chamber, she stared into the cracked mirror above her hearth, her reflection fractured and fading in the cold. She would be crowned in 2 days. By then, the lie had to be buried or everyone who whispered it. Burned, that morning of the coronation broke cold and grey. The skies over Winterfell, heavy with storm clouds that hadn't yet decided whether to cry snow or fire. The great hall had been transformed. Stone walls now bore woven banners of white and silver. The sigil of House Stark interlaced with the new royal crest, a direwolf wrapped in a broken crown. It was elegant, powerful, terrifying in its quiet declaration. This was no longer a house of honor, it was a house of rule. Sansa stood at the far end of the hall, robed in black, trimmed with iron thread. The crown resting on the velvet cushion before her was unlike any Westeros had seen. No dragons, no lions, no stags' antlers. It was raw, forged from northern steel, and meant to look like it had been pulled from the bones of the old gods themselves. Outside, the courtyard buzzed with tension. Guards lined the walls. Archers watched from the towers. Every guest had been searched. Every servant watched. Sansa had ordered Roderick to station double guards near the kitchens, the Maester's quarters. And the rookery. No one would send a raven today. No one would escape. Not again. Arya hadn't slept. She'd spent the night beneath Winterfell's bones, moving through forgotten corridors and broken cellars, retracing steps, reading names from old ledgers, and questioning servants too afraid to lie. She found Elsbeth's cloak stuffed into a barrel of grain, soaked in wine. She found blood just a little on the handle of the rookery's trapdoor, and she found the letters twin-a-copy, unsigned, half written, tucked into a loose stone beneath the girl's cot. But no girl. Arya didn't need to ask what had happened to her. She already knew. Sansa was killing the story before it could speak again. But Arya wasn't sure if she was ready to stop her. Not yet. By noon, the hall was filled. Lords and ladies took their seats. The banners swayed gently above them. The Maester stood ready with the crown. A bard played a slow, reverent tune, something old and northern about winter and survival. And then Sansa entered. The room fell silent. She walked slowly, every step echoing like a heartbeat. Her gown shimmered in the firelight, black, silver, and a red pattern running down the spine that looked unsettlingly like a river of blood. Her hair was braided high, her expression carved from stone. She passed the throne Bran once sat in. She did not flinch. The Maester stepped forward. "Do you swear to protect the realm from chaos? To keep the wolves from the gate? To uphold the laws of men and the whispers of the old gods alike?" Sansa raised her chin. "I swear." He turned to the crowd. "Do you, the lords and ladies of the realm, accept Queen Sansa Stark as ruler of the United Realm?" There were scattered murmurs, some voices clear, others hesitant. Then the doors slammed open. All eyes turned. Arya stood in the doorway, her hair tangled by wind, her cloak heavy with snow. She didn't bow, she didn't smile. She walked into the hall like it still belonged to her. Whispers rippled like thunder. The Queen said nothing. Arya stopped at the center of the hall, between the nobles and the throne. "I bring a name," she said, voice loud and even, "and a question." Sansa's fingers twitched. "Speak it, Elsbeth." "A servant girl, gone without a trace." "She ran," Sansa said coolly. "Cowards do." Arya shook her head. "She sent a letter south. She saw something. She saw what she wanted to see." "No," Arya said, eyes narrowing. "She saw the truth." The room tensed. You could hear the guards shift. One reached for his sword, Dradrick. Sansa gave him the slightest shake of her head. "Not yet. You killed Bran," Arya said. The words hung like frost in the air. Sansa didn't blink. "I saved the realm." "No," Arya said, softer now. "You traded a brother for a crown." And finally, something flickered in Sansa's eyes. Grief, maybe, or rage, or regret buried under layers of rule and frost. She stepped forward. Her voice carried. "Bran died because he forgot what it meant to feel, to fear, to bleed. He saw the world through wings and smoke. He would have watched us all burn. I did what none of you had the courage to do. I ended the story before it became prophecy." Arya looked at her for a long moment, then pulled something from her cloak. The vile gasps echoed through the hall. A dozen lords leaned forward. Arya held it high. "This was found in your chambers." Sansa didn't deny it. She didn't flinch. Instead, she turned to the hall and raised her voice. "Let them judge. Let the realm choose. Do you want a ghost on the throne, or a woman who bleeds like you, who fights like you, who knows what it costs to survive?" And for a terrifying moment they cheered, because the realm didn't care about purity anymore. It cared about peace, even if it was forged from poison. But outside the castle walls, riders had already begun to gather, cloaked in red and gold, led by the last living blood of Cersei Lannister, and they weren't here to cheer. They were here to finish what Arya had started. The wind howled louder that night, carrying with it the scent of steel and storm. Snow fell in angry flurries, blanketing Winterfell's towers, while shadows gathered just beyond the tree line. Flickers of torchlight dotted the edge of the forest hue, organized for bandits, too quiet for traders. They were here, the Lannister loyalists. From the ramparts, Arya watched them arrive, dozens at first, then hundreds. Red and gold cloaks beneath thick, weather-worn armor. Among them flew no official sigils, but the message was clear. Vengeance didn't need a banner, it just needed a cause. At their center rode Lady Amara Lannister. Arya recognized her immediately. Long, golden hair braided like Cersei's, a cold face carved with spite, and those unmistakable lion eyes. Arya had seen those eyes before, weeping above the ruins of a dying castle. Now they looked hungry. She turned to Roderick, who stood beside her with a grim expression. The Lannisters never forget, do they? He shook his head. They've been building for years, waiting for a weakness, and now we've given them one. In the great hall, Sansa sat alone at the throne, the crown still in her lap, untouched. The coronation had been postponed. The realm had seen Arya's accusation. The vial had been confiscated, sent to Old Town for testing. Lords were whispering in corners. Raven feathers cluttered the rookery. Her rule hung by a thread. And now a lion was scratching at her gate. Mester Hallen entered quietly. The Lannister host is gathering outside the walls. Amara demands an audience. Sansa didn't look at him. She demands a war. She claims to have letters, Hallen added. Proof of your involvement in the king's death. She says she'll present them before the Realman, lest you surrender Winterfell. Sansa laughed softly. Of course she will. She doesn't want justice. She wants fire and blood. Arya sat with Jon's old sword in her lap, staring at the sharpened steel like it might give her the answer she was too afraid to say aloud. She had always known who the enemy was. Lannister's phrase, the Night King. But now she looked up as footsteps approached. Sansa, they didn't speak for a while, just stared at each other like strangers who shared a name. Then Sansa said, they'll come at dawn, I know. You'll fight. Arya hesitated. And in that moment, Sansa looked almost tired. I didn't want this, she said, voice brittle. I didn't want war. I didn't want to kill Bran. I wanted peace. I wanted a north where girls like us didn't have to survive by becoming monsters. Arya looked at her. You wanted a crown. No, Sansa whispered. I wanted to be safe. I wanted to never be used again. And Arya believed her. But that didn't make her innocent. Before sunrise, the horn sounded. The Lannisters were moving. Winterfell's gates groaned closed. Archers lined the towers. Oil boiled above the walls, and in the silence before the first clash, Arya stood beside Sansa atop the battlements, both cloaked in black. Will they breach the walls? Sansa asked. If they do, you won't get another chance to defend yourself, Arya said. This ends today by steel or by truth. Sansa looked out at the marching host. Then stay with me, Arya. Turned to her, brows furrowed. Why? Because you're the only person left who'll kill me for the right reasons. Arya didn't reply. The first wave hit the gates. Steel met stone. Shields splintered. The clash of war exploded across the snow. Lannister forces stormed forward with battering rams and ladders. Flaming arrows lit the sky. Roderick fought like a wolf possessed, barking orders, cutting down anything in gold. Inside, the castle burned. Sansa was escorted to the crypts by her personal guard, an escape route prepared in case the walls fell. But Arya didn't follow. She had seen Amara. On the battlefield, Arya moved like smoke. She weaved through soldiers, blades flashing in her hands, blood on her boots. She cut her way toward the lion. And there she was, Samara Lannister, wrapped in red, sword drawn, smile sharp. I was hoping you'd come, Amara purred. Stark. Girls always fight dirty, but at least you fight. Arya didn't speak. She just lunged. Their duel was savage, less graceful than Arya's other fights, more desperate. Amara was no knight, but she fought like someone who had survived betrayal, and built her rage into armor. She fought like a woman wronged. You think you're the heroes. Amara screamed as their swords clashed. But your sister murdered a king, and the world will know. Arya slammed her dagger into Amara's side, twisting hard. I'm not a hero, Arya whispered. I'm a Stark. By sunset, the battlefield was a graveyard. Lannister bodies littered the snow. Winterfell still stood, but barely. Fires smoldered. The walls were cracked, the people shaken. And in the crypts, Sansa emerged slowly, her gown soaked in sweat, her hair unbound. She saw Arya waiting for her in the courtyard. Amara was dead. The threat had been stopped, but only this one. Arya held the copy of the Raven's letter. I could give this to the realm, she said. Sansa nodded. You could. Arya stepped closer. Tell me why I shouldn't. Sansa met her eyes, voice steady. Because I've already paid the price. And if you hand it over, they won't kill just me. They'll tear down the north. Again. Arya held her breath. Then slowly, she dropped the letter into the fire. Sansa's shoulders sagged, but Arya didn't look at her again. She turned and walked away. The next morning, the crown was placed on Sansa's head. The realm had seen the banners of Lannisters fall. They had seen a queen defend her home. They had seen fire, and they had chosen the flame that didn't burn them. But behind the crown, behind the cheers, behind the victory, was a sister watching from the shadows, and she had not forgotten what was done. The snow fell gently that morning, softening the jagged scars that the battle had left across Winterfell's walls. Ash mixed with frost, coating the ground like a quiet warning. Peace never came without cost. Inside the great hall, the throne had been repaired. The banners had been rehung. Sansa Stark sat upon the iron-forged seat of the north, her crown now resting comfortably on her brow. She had survived the war. She had silenced the whispers. The realm bowed to her, not out of love, but fear, and for a queen that was enough. But Arya hadn't been seen in days, not since the letter had burned. In the courtyard fire, Sansa's steps echoed down the stone corridor as she made her way through Winterfell's lower levels, past the armory, past the war room, past the ghost of everything she'd once been. She wore no crown now, just a heavy cloak. Her hair was unbraided, hanging like a curtain of silence across her back. She knew where Arya would be. She had always known. Down in the crypts, Arya stood before their father's statue, her arms crossed, her eyes distant, her breath misted in the cold. But her body didn't shiver. She didn't turn when Sansa approached. They stood together in silence for a while, two women who had once been girls playing at royalty, love, vengeance. Now they were queens in different ways. I buried her, Arya said quietly. Elsbeth, I found her body in the well, the stone. You used to weigh her down, had your crest on it. Sansa closed her eyes. I never meant to, no, Arya cut her off. But you did. I spared the north, Sansa whispered, and I spared you. Arya turned to her then. Her face was calm, but her eyes were cold and endless, like the long night. I burned the letter, she said. I let the truth die. Sansa nodded. Thank you. I didn't do it for you, Arya said. I did it because I've seen what happens when chaos rules. What happens when the realm forgets what it's afraid of. She stepped closer. But you should know, sister, you're not safe. Not from me. Not from the truth. You think you've won, but you've just become the next name in the song. And one day, the song always changes. Sansa's voice was barely a whisper. Will you kill me? Arya looked at her for a long moment. No, and then, but I'll be watching. She turned, cloak whipping behind her like shadow and silence. That night, a lone horse rode out from Winterfell. Arya didn't look back. She didn't need to. The North would remember. The realm would kneel. But somewhere, deep beneath the banners and the blood, a truth still pulsed in the dark. The Queen had killed a king. The wolf had betrayed her pack. And the girl with the dagger had let her live not out of mercy, but out of calculation. Because sometimes vengeance wears a crown, and sometimes justice waits in silence.